We're live. Hello and welcome to our interview with Susan Elizabeth Phillips as part of a romantic rendezvous locked down. Today I'll be talking with Susan, whose website says, because life is better with happily ever afters, about her amazing career and her upcoming release, Dance Away With Me, which is due out on 9th of June. So not too long to wait. And isn't that a gorgeous cover? That's beautiful. Yoo-hoo. So Susan, hello to you and thank you for taking time to meet with us today.
I am delighted. I have been wanting to meet with the Australian romance writers forever, but I didn't want to be in a plane for 4 days to get there. So this is just perfect.
I have a suggestion on how you can do that. Take time to get here and keep breaking your journey.
Yeah, really.
So we'll get to Dance Away With Me soon because it's a new standalone novel for you and has great premise. But I'd like to talk first a little bit about your amazing career. So the story on your website about the first novel that you and your friend Claire wrote is hilarious. Did it really happen like that?
It happened exactly like that. We were both home with young children, and we were readers. This was when historical romance was just hitting with books like Kathleen Woodiwis's and Joanna Lindsay's and Rosemary Rogers. And we just got this idea for writing a book and decided to do it. Never actually believing it would get published. It was really fun. It's the only time I've ever written a book with anybody else, but I probably wouldn't have started writing except for that experience because it was like a security blanket. We were just doing it for fun. So that is indeed the way it happened. The whole story is on my website.
Yes, I had fun reading that today. Which leads me to another question that I had was about collaboration. Ever since then, your books have all been just you. Mm-hmm. And I know you had a chat with Jane Ann Krentz this morning.
Yes,
would you ever consider collaborating with another author? Is there someone that you've ever had in mind you'd like to collaborate with?
No, I wouldn't do it now because I'm just too set in my ways. But it was a great way as somebody who had never written to get started. Just because there were no stakes. I don't think we really believed it was ever going to get published. And it was just a fun thing to do. I had a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old at the time, and I was home full time with them. So it was just a wonderful distraction. But right now I have a very singular vision of how I want my books to be. And I don't think I'd play well with others in that playground. I haven't really thought about it though.
Fair enough. We like what you write as a standalone person. The premise of, we'll go way back now to It Had to Be You. Mm-hmm. The premise was such a fun idea. Talk about throwing someone into the deep end and seeing if they can swim. Can you remember how much fun that book was to write?
It was, I'd had this idea in the back of my mind. That was one of my earlier books and the first of the Chicago Stars books. I had this idea in the back of my mind about what if a woman who knew nothing about football inherited a professional American football team. And it just, every time I thought about it, it made me laugh. And so that was kind of the seed. And I sat down and I wrote chapter 1, those words, not the chapter. And what has become my process, exploring what I was doing as I went through it. So that was my first book about professional football. And at that time, the Chicago Bears office did cooperate with me, and they were very helpful in giving me a little feeling of what was behind the scenes. But ultimately, of course, that book's not really about football. It's a fish out of water story. My favorite story is when a woman has to compete, go head to head against men. And I think that was especially it was a powerful story for me to tell at that time. Because of my age, I remember when the playing field was people think the playing field is unequal now. They should have tried it back in the 1970s. I remember interviewing for a job with Ohio Bell. And I had to tell them who I was dating, my boyfriend, what my boyfriend did, were we going to get married? And I also remember when Mr. Bill and I got married, he was still a student, and he had debt, okay? I did not. I was teaching then, and I had my little credit card. I had credit. I had everything that he didn't have. I had my little credit card that had my name on it. When we got married, I had to change it to Mrs. William Phillips. I couldn't have a credit card in my own name. So those stories of women really competing and triumphing in what is the biggest man's world you can imagine is something that's always appealed to me.
And had you been a football fan before then?
Yeah, I kind of like American football is it's probably the only sport I follow. I don't watch, like when the Chicago Bears play, I don't watch every game, but once they get close to the end and their championship games, I do enjoy it. My father was a big football fan, my husband. So I kind of grew up, especially on Sunday afternoons, with the sounds of football games going in the background of my life. So I do kind of enjoy the game, but I'm really interested in backstories on players and how all that behind the scenes stuff works. I just find that very interesting. I thought, well, why not put a woman in the middle of it?
No, it's great fun. When I was looking at your website, amazingly, you have 25 books currently in print, which is just enormous.
Really?
Yeah, when I counted them up. Did you ever dream when you first started that 30 years later and 25 books that you'd still be writing Happily Ever Afters?
My career just feels so random to me. My ambition, I was a high school teacher for a while. My ambitions in life were to be a wife, to be a mother. I wanted to teach school for a bit, but really I wanted to be a movie star. So writing became my backup career. I sort of fell into it because I'd been a lifelong reader. And like so many writers, I wanted to write the story that I wanted to read. But I never had a long-term vision of a career. It was always sort of one book at a time. And in the early days, writing books was harrowing for me because I always felt like I wasn't going to be able to pull out what was happening, and the book was collapsing on me, and that no matter what I wrote, people were going to like what I'd written before better. So it took probably 10 or 11 books before I got my head straight, but I never thought long term. I just kind of had a vision of what I wanted to do and took it off. It's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? That's sort of the way it happened.
That's one of my favorite sayings, by the way.
Mm.
You love writing complicated and layered heroes. Where do you get your inspiration from?
I think the inspiration comes from the heroine, because I love stories of a woman finding her own way, a woman competing. Usually, the terrific writer Jennifer Crusoe used to say, Susan, you torture your heroines at the beginning, because generally I pull out their whole support structure. And so we're watching the heroine's journey. And for me, part of that heroine's journey is going to be this difficult hero. I've always seen these stories of women triumphing. And one of the things I like to show them doing is overcoming the odds. In many of my books, really, the hero is both a protagonist and an antagonist, because he's one more hurdle she has to overcome. So I love that kind of conflict. And if you have just a guy who's nice and sensitive and wants the best for her from the very beginning, that whole churn is missing for me. I want the churn of that story.
Yep. You got to torture them and then torture them again, haven't you?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the way it works.
So, there are authors who write series and there are authors who only write standalone. You write a mix. What's the attraction for you of writing series like the Chicago Stars and the Wynette, Texas series? Do you have more planned? Oh, sorry.
No. Because I don't plan ahead, the Chicago Stars book were an accident. That fact that it was a series was a total accident. I wrote It Had to Be You, the story of Phoebe, who inherits the Chicago Stars team. And early in the book, this wide receiver out of Tularosa, Texas, named Bobby Tom Denton, comes into this book. And he was so full of himself. I got fascinated by him, and I had to know his story. So I thought they were going to be the two books. And then I went off and I wrote something else. And then I got another idea. And then so the whole series happened accidentally. After I wrote this Heart of Mine, I said, that's it. No more Chicago Stars books. I had no more ideas. And I even have an epilogue in that book where I bring all the characters on stage at this baptism, right? To have their farewell bows, sort of. And then I got another idea a couple books down. So with the Chicago Stars books and any book set in Wynette, Texas, it's a universe I'm familiar with. I love writing. I have to say, if I could write every book in that series, either in Wynette, Texas, or with the Chicago Stars, I probably would. But I won't write any book unless I have the right idea for that series. So every time I think I've written my last Chicago Stars book, I go on, I write something else, and then I'll get an idea. And I do think, when I get these ideas, is this something that would fit in the Stars world? If it's not a fit, I won't write it. I love those books. I love writing about Wynette, Texas, but won't write those books unless I have the right idea. The standalone books let me go wherever I want, and I'm so fortunate that my readers will go on that journey with me. That I think you always know it's the same author, because the books have a lot of emotional churn to them. They're usually, some of them are pure romantic comedies, some of them are roms, some of them, like Dance Away With Me is a book that's a little more heartfelt. It's a real emotional journey. You always know that you're not going to want to kill yourself out of depression when the book is over. That is one thing I would never do to my readers.
It's the brand promise, isn't it?
It's the brand promise.
Okay, this is great. So let's now turn, because you've referred to it and shown that gorgeous cover again, let's look at Dance Away With Me. I'm very much looking forward to reading Tess and Ian's stories and watch them earn their happily ever after. How did these characters...
They're going to have to earn it, let me tell you. Wow.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So how did they present themselves to you and ask you to write their story?
This is a book that sometimes an idea will just kind of come to me. The concept comes right away. This book had a strange journey. I was hiking in Sicily. It was the middle of the night, and I woke up with this dream about a Sicilian midwife in the 1950s, and this child, and it was just like this dream that was so vivid. And I woke up and I thought, I got to write that. And then I thought, no, Susan, you don't know anything about Sicilian midwives in the 1950s. But the idea kept tugging at me, and I could see this heart pull in it. And that's when I started thinking, okay, what if this was a contemporary setting? So what you have in Dance Away With Me is you have a young midwife who's also just a devastated young widow. And she's deeply grieving the loss of her husband. And she's moved to this ramshackle cabin high up in the mountains, high above the town of Tempest, Tennessee. All she wants is to be left alone. And then you have the hero, Ian Hamilton North IV. And that fourth is important. He is a street artist. This was a whole new area of research for me. I love the art world and learning about street art. Hamilton is North is he is the American equivalent of that great artist Banksy. And this is a guy who's being tortured in 13 different directions. All he wants is to be left alone. So you have these two people who are at crisis points in their life, who only want to be left alone, and that is so not going to happen because parts of the community are going to be coming in at them at all directions. So it's one of those books that sort of straddles the line between romance and women's fiction, which is the line I love reading and I love writing on. It's a story about how families are built, really, in addition to this big love story. And it's a story about community. We've got a bunch of teenagers who are causing trouble in this. We have a ramshackle coffee shop. I mean, it's just a real landscape of people and events that I just want the reader to be able to escape into.
Sounds like a great read. In the book, or in the blurb to the book, you mention a host of secondary characters with their own agendas. Are any of them talking to you about a sequel yet?
No, they're not. You know, I write, a lot of my books have children in them, and readers would love those kids' stories. And I think I've only written one of the kids' stories, Meg, no, not Meg, Molly, the little sister, and It Had to Be You. I gave her her own story. And that was in This Heart of Mine. And I give Meg Coranda her own story. This does have kids in it, and I'm sure they'd like, and I know when they're done, readers would like their story. But unless I get the right kind of inspiration, I probably won't go there. Right now, they're not calling to me. They're so happy. And they're basically saying, Susan, our lives are good now. Stay out of them. Do not mess with them.
Yeah, I hear you. So you have another book on the boil already, of course. So can we have a little hint about that, or is it still really secret? Okay.
I am writing a book. I'm actually 400 pages in. I just hit 400. So this new one is, I'm chugging or churning my way toward the end. Can't wait to talk about it, but I'm going to wait to talk about it until Dance Away With Me is over. But thank you for asking.
No problem. I always have to try for our readers. Susan, what else would you like to tell us over here in Australia about you? Is there any little story that you'd like to share?
Well, this is an audience of writers, correct?
Readers.
Readers.
Australian romance readers, and they're so excited. They love you over here, and they'll be.
And I hear from my Australian readers all the time. I think that so many interesting things are going on with readers right now. With the quarantine and the state we're in, I think a lot of readers, some of them are looking for new authors, but a lot of them seem to be going back and rereading old books and finding comfort reads. I understand that. I think it's really interesting. It might not be the best time for a new author to be having a book come out, that's difficult. The things that have happened in technology in the last 10 years with ebooks and giving us so many different ways to read. Now, I will never give up my actual print books. I really, really adore them. I think now is a time when readers really want to be swept away, and I don't know about you and everybody who's listening to this, but I feel like I want positive stories now. There's so much stuff in the news right now that isn't positive. I want positive stories. And I think that's what we're looking for. And isn't it great that we're readers right now? This gives us a whole new way to escape, to fill our time, to entertain ourselves that non-readers just don't have. I mean, there's only so much Netflix you can watch. So I think it's really a great time for readers.
I think you're right. I'm just hoping that while the pandemic may be an inspiration for some, that we don't just see a whole raft of pandemic books. And then
it's an interesting challenge for a writer. I was thinking about that in terms of the book I'm working on right now. Of course, in Dance Away With Me, there is no pandemic. But do we as writers going forward, do we ignore this, or do we have to build it in the backstory? I'm sure there are thousands of romances being written right now of the hero and heroine who are stranded together during the quarantine. But yeah, I'm kind of wrestling with that now, and I don't have to make a decision about it now, but I think it's certainly going to come up.
Yeah. And, think of, what is it? Love in the time of cholera. We could have love in the time of coronavirus. But,
that title keeps going through my head lately.
Bit of a worry. So, Susan, you said before that you didn't want to be on a plane for 4 days to get over here. Do you think you'll actually brave it one day and come on over? You could stop 3 or 4 days on the way and,
I mean, you have such an amazing country. And I travel a lot. I especially do hiking trips. I've done hiking trips all over the world, and Australia is there beckoning me. And then I think, it's a huge country. It's like people who want to visit the United States and they see New York and Miami, and that's kind of it. I'm trying to think where I would even start. But I'm sure at some point I'm going to be over there. It's pretty irresistible. I really enjoy books that are set in Australia. It's a fun place to read about. Monica McInerney is one of my favorite writers. I love her books. And I just really enjoy that whole setting.
Let's go back a little bit to the travel. When I was reading your website, you've been to some really interesting places and done some very interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
What are a couple of the highlights that you have from your travels?
Every country, I think of it as glam hiking. Okay, I have a couple of walking companies I work with, where my friend Helen and we leave our husbands on the golf course and we take off, and we take off with our Kindles usually, and sometimes another book. And the way these trips work is we leave a hotel in the morning with our day pack and we hike all day, usually hike to some out of the way, lovely little inn or restaurant for lunch. And then we hike in the afternoon and we end up at a lovely hotel where we can take a shower, have a great dinner, a great bed, and then we go on the trail the next day. So it's as you see, it's glam hiking. I've hiked glaciers in Iceland. That was a wonderful trip. I hiked across the part of the desert in Morocco. And I remember when I was in Morocco being in the public square in Marrakesh when the rain came in. I was on a little balcony watching the snake charmers and all the souvenir sellers and the rain coming in and hearing Toto's song. Right now, I can't even remember if I actually heard Toto's song, if they were playing it on the loudspeaker, or if I just heard it in my head. Those were wonderful memories. Hiking 6 days through downpours in Ireland, absolutely beautiful. Loved every bit of it. I was at Machu Picchu, and I was by myself at one of the top levels when a storm came in, and I watched the storm come in over the Andes to where I was. These are just wonderful experiences. Only one of my trips, well, if you count the trip in Sicily as being the sort of the ground for my idea for Dance Away With Me, the only trip I actually used in a book was Breathing Room. Breathing Room is my book that's set in Tuscany, and I was on the trail one day, and I just started thinking about kind of like a control freak sort of woman who taught who's one of those lifestyle trainers whose life falls apart, and it would be so cool to bring her to Italy. And I spent the rest of that trip with my notepad out, taking notes on things that I was seeing and doing, and that became Breathing Room. So that was a book that definitely my travels inspired. But in general, I kind of turn off that part of my brain when I'm hiking and just enjoy what I'm seeing.
Mm. Well, that's good. And as a writer, you need to refresh the battery and fill the well.
You do, and you're tucking everything that you see away to be used at some point.
Mm. All right, Susan, I have run out of questions for you. So if there's anything else you'd like to say to the readers in Australia, otherwise I'll wrap up.
I just am so grateful to have so many readers in Australia. And I'm really, really happy that I've had this experience to connect. This is, my U.S. tour for Dance Away With Me obviously got canceled, but what's been replacing it are all of these viral events. And I don't get to touch and hug readers, but I get to connect with so many more readers. And I really love doing that. And I'm just so grateful to the booksellers and the readers in Australia who have supported my book so much. And one of these days, I'm coming down to meet you.
We look forward to it.
Oh.
I'll get you to hold that up for me. Okay, yes, here is the treasure hunt with Susan. Thank you very much.
No, welcome.
All right, readers, don't forget that you can connect with Susan on her website at susanelizabethphillips.com, as well as on her Facebook and Instagram pages where she frequently posts for you about her travels and what's going on. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm sure I speak for all of your fans here when I say we hope to see you here sometime in the future, and we're really looking forward to the release on 9th of June of Dance Away With Me.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Take care.
You too.